This is day 9 of the June 94 10-day retreat in Springwater. Not really being quite sure what to talk about today. No choice has been made. It occurred that if nothing comes up, we can always listen to the wind. Just comes to mind that the Indian word nirvana, if I'm correct in remembering it, means the absence of wind. Yesterday, after all the wind and blowing and sounding there was, suddenly it was still. We remarked about it in meetings. The silence, the quietness, in the absence of all wind. So, breathing and heart beating, physical sensations, and the starting of raindrops, more and more of them, and a downpour with all of its music, happened or happens in stillness. It's amazing. Sound happening in the midst of stillness, movement in the midst of no moving, or no moving in the midst of moving. Or emptiness in the midst of all the stuff. Light stuff, transparent stuff, and pretty dense stuff, permeated by emptiness. Meaning, if it can be put into words, haltingly, the mind free of concern about itself, free of taking a position. One could say all the windows and doors and skylights open, but better yet, no house. Stepping outside. No enclosure. Which is the enclosure of self-reference and self-concern, which is not being condemned or wished away, but it can be absent, wonder of wonders. Were we all finished with choice? We weren't. We had another meeting last night. Very lively meeting, very animated. One person starting it out by saying, and I can't repeat verbatim, I can only get what was the gist for me. It's all right to think I have a choice experienced it myself. Someone told me, you can choose not to continue with this addiction or this addictive habit, and something shifted, and the addictive habit was dropped. And person adding that the danger of thinking, I have no choice, everything happens in its own time, I have to wait, can lead to a passivity. I would like to examine that. And what comes to mind immediately is, do ideas have power over this body-mind? Power to cause action or reaction? I think we can affirm that ideas have tremendous power to stir human beings into action or inaction. And the idea, which has been around for human beings for a long time, that we have free choice, can ignite the will to action. I'm not saying that this was the case for the particular person. This is what really happens when a habit is dropped, is open to inspection by that very person, to really see what happens, and it can only be seen clearly if there's no clinging to ideas about it, how it happened. The freedom of ideas is the freedom to look at what is actually going on. But leaving that particular case aside right now, the idea that I have freedom of choice, freedom of will, can be a powerfully energizing one. Just as the idea I have no power, I am helpless, I have to wait for things to happen, I have no choice in any matter, forces decide for me. A very depressive effect of a person said brings with it passivity. Both of them ideas affecting the organism differently. Alone and collectively, because very often ideas are shared collectively and therefore exert collective power. So the way we're concerned here with ideas is not to promote them, not to issue credos in no choice or in choice, and demand or manipulate the mind into believing them, but to expose and to look at what is an idea in the first place and what power does it have, what effect on the thinking, on the reacting, on the emoting and feeling of this body-mind or mind-body. Someone told me in a private meeting, a person is a therapist, that in the area where he works with children, he has a poster. Now, I may not remember the exact wording, but something to the effect of, you can choose. Or it was something like that. I hope I'm not misrepresenting it. Something to bring to mind of the child that it can choose. It is not, well, I'm now adding an interpretation of it. Because things we say have implications. Implication is you're not a puppet at the forces of the adults, the teachers, the homework, whatever all are the forces impinging on small body minds, small mind bodies, so vulnerable to conditioning. So exposed to manipulation. And maybe the words posted, "You have choice," can be a counter effect to the idea I'm helpless. So that is another thing that ideas can do. One idea supplanting or taking the place of another, and maybe one idea having a more felicitous effect on the body, more energizing, more hope-inspiring than another, which induces feelings of inadequacy, insufficiency, or helplessness. So maybe if we have been under the impact of the idea that we're helpless, powerless in the face of an addiction, hearing we're not, give an infusion of energy. The energy to test it out, to drop and see what happens. So ideas can go quite a ways in empowering or disempowering the organism, and are used by institutions created by ourselves, political institutions or religious institutions, educational institutions, using ideas to empower or disempower. But we can go further. We don't have to stop at using ideas to empower or disempower ourselves and each other, replacing ideas with new ones. Is the idea, I'm stopping, I'm not going further right now, is the idea of there being no separation a helpful one? Replacing the one that there is separation. Some people feel it's helpful to think this way, other people feel it's scary to think this way. Because it depends on how one puts it. Putting it to say, we're not all isolated individual entities, we're one whole humanity, one family, using words that are appealing and not frightening. Is that helpful to replace the idea that we're isolated and alienated from each other, lonely, divided from each other and within, to replace that idea with the idea of wholeness? Can have a salutary effect on the psyche, arouse some positive energies to feel better about ourselves and each other. David Bohm in his books has pointed out how the way that scientists, physicists have viewed the universe in times gone by as consisting of separate particles. The only thing was needed was to find the smallest particle, and then we know everything. These particles acting on each other in lawful ways within a framework of space and time. The replacement of that with fields, whole fields of action. I'm not a popular physicist to explain it well. I've read a lot, but I can't retain it and give it back very well. But to replace past ideas, cosmologies of physical systems with newer ones which are more accurate, more close to the truth, may be an important first step. Has an influence. The other has had an influence on our economic theories and ways of behaving in economics. Each out for himself. So philosophies and worldviews have had and do have an influence upon our feeling, upon our thoughts and our reactions. Maybe more positive or more negative. And certainly to replace false ideas with true or more closer to the truth ideas can be a helpful thing, or is a helpful thing. How helpful? How much we cling? We know the sun is not rising, but that's how we see it, right? We don't see ourselves turning toward it. We see it rising and setting. So, it is one thing to replace the belief in separation, individualism, entityism, alienation, by a belief in togetherness, union, wholeness, non-division, non-separation, one field of being. But how far does a belief go in terms of self-understanding, self-knowledge, self-insight? And does a belief, no matter how closely approximating what is believed to be true, can a belief itself understand and see that it is a belief? Can an idea see that it is an idea? Temporary, arbitrary often, provisional, hypothetical, true until proven false. That's the best we do in science, saying something is said to be true until proven to be false. But ideas themselves can't see themselves as ideas. And that's why we're fighting over them. Because we take idea to be something absolute. We confuse it with what we believe is truth. And don't see belief as belief. How does that happen? That idea and belief and thought are exposed for what they are. I don't mean so much exposed for their truth or falsehood. That's a side effect. But exposed that this is belief, this is concept. This is idea, this is speculation. If we just think it is, then we again argue from morning till night. It is, no it isn't, this is, this isn't. It takes direct insight or seeing out of no belief, out of what we called a little while ago emptiness, the emptiness of attachment to oneself as needing beliefs to exist. absence of that, the quieting down of that whole network, which we call me and mine. Quieting down meaning energy is not flowing and energizing the network of me-ness with its memories and anticipations and ideas and attachment to its identifications. Energy isn't flowing there, it is gathering here. In the wind blowing and the birds singing and listening to a talk and the breathing and the physical motions and sensations that are taking place right now. In that space of openness and clarity, clarity not meaning not shaded over or fogged over by self-concern and self-worry, the network being at ease, out of commission for the time being. Out of that clarity, or in that clarity, it's very clear what is a belief. Because belief is a narrowing of the mind into a certain channel that can be seen. And if it is identified with, which it usually is, we wouldn't hold beliefs if we weren't identified with them. The being questioned or attacked arouses defensive and aggressive emotions in this very organism. All this is viewable, either in the present when it is about to set into motion, or as a memory evoked, which can be looked at clearly out of a space of openness. That reveals what belief is and what idea is. And that it is never and can never be what it purports to be, a representation of the truth, a true representation of the truth. It's impossible. Idea, belief is narrow, limited, and hooking directly into our organismic functioning of defense and aggression, and security or insecurity. We do find security in our beliefs and ideas. And if they're questioned or attacked, or maybe someone attempts to prove them wrong, things start up in the organism which we identify as insecurity or fear, anxiety, squeamishness, squeeziness in the stomach, as though I've never been in a big earthquake, but that's how it must be. The ground shakes. You have nothing to be anchored in or on anymore. Everything moving, nothing predictably safe. I want to add very quickly, this is only when there is attachment to belief and a keeping, holding on to it, that this insecurity manifests. Because the only security there is for human beings is not to have any beliefs or ideas that one is attached to. One may play around with them or use them expediently, but aware that they just go so far and are not to be relied on for security. They cannot provide it. It's an error to think that way. Now, I can hear a thought arising. I have known people who had such strong faith and belief that even in the face of utter adversity, that faith remained unshakable, and therefore their security remained unshakable. I was told once of a statistic that of a woman who works in geriatrics. I don't know what the name is of a person who works in geriatrics. Geriatrologist or something. She showed me an article in which one had statistically examined old folks according to whether they had beliefs, strong beliefs, weak beliefs, no beliefs. And it appeared from that one study that those with strong beliefs lived longer and healthier than those with weak beliefs or those with no beliefs. Of course, these days, after what happened with medical published art, one has to be very careful in believing statistics. The drive to publish and to become famous is so strong, and it does not stop with scientists and researchers, unfortunately. So, maybe a fact, maybe false, maybe true, that a strong belief protects from illness and prolongs life. A little bit. It doesn't make much difference, really. Or does it? But I don't want to negate the power of ideas. We started out that way. Or is it that a person who may outwardly project a strong belief is grounded in something other than belief? What could one be grounded in other than belief? That all is well, that all is all right the way it is, and not with a plus or minus sign in front of it, but as it is, because this is how it is. And being grounded in being as one is, not as one should be, which is idea, or wants to become, which is belief. And not just grounded in the all-rightness of oneself, but everything around one, which is not separate from oneself. The direct experience of that. We said earlier, the movement in midst of no movement, or no movement in the very midst of the hurricane, the eye of the tornado, in which though things are flying about destructively, left and right, up and down, there is the eye. I don't mean capital I. The eye that sees it all without self-reference, without fear of living or fear of dying. Not just without fear of living, but with great love for living. Not as an idea I ought to love, because that's what people should do, particularly spiritual people should manifest unconditional love. It's ideas. is there love which is not an idea? It was, I think, never once asked in this retreat. In both Germany and Sweden, there were whole talks on love because there was a lot of questioning about it. The retreat varied from one time to another. But it popped up right now. Although one person said all that matters really is love. But the question of what is intelligence has come up several times because it has been mentioned several times. And we will devote the remaining time maybe to the two of them because they're inseparable. Inseparable from inseparableness. Last night, I believe it was in the group meeting that there were questions about what is this intelligence anyways that you talk about? Is it an outer force? Something that directs us? Something that guides us? I have no knowledge of an intelligence outside of everything. I have no knowledge of anything outside of this. There is no outside as far as I'm concerned. And I don't think it's imagination or belief. But someone else may have experience of intelligence guiding, but one has to be looking carefully. Intelligence there is, but thought so quickly, so instantaneously goes to work on what is experienced and seen to make it graspable, understandable, visible, symbolic. Frameable, so we can put it on the wall. Repeatable, so we can repeat it to ourselves and our children. So what is intelligence, as I see it? And nothing that is said here is proposed to be believed or taken over. We've talked about that at the very beginning. It's up for investigation, for questioning. Intelligence is to see clearly. It only happens or manifests or unfolds in seeing clearly. And it sees clearly what is narrowing and divisive for human beings. The trees and deer are not divisive. They live intelligently, without brains of the kind that we have, which stores and repeats and projects. So they don't have our problems. So, is intelligence, let's put it as a question, is intelligence to see clearly out of a being open, not all wrapped up in self-worry and self-concern, that being quiet? Is intelligence seeing clearly what wraps up, what divides, what causes harm to each other, what is damaging to relationship between human beings? And the example that pops up is to see image and identification with image as dangerous, divisive, separating, with the possibility, the potential to incite this body to violence, violent defense and violent attack of those who would not submit to one's own image or attack it, or believe in theirs. Thinking about all of our divisions, religious, ethnic, political, which are causing mass murder, mass massacres, hundreds of thousands of people slain in a country so small one had never even heard about it before. It finally came on the news. One tribe against the other, one religion against the other. Is it intelligent to see the absurdity of that, the danger of it? And is it intelligence to drop identification for oneself with what? With all that one is identified with, which doesn't mean dropping out of the world, but working in it, with it, without identification. That came up very late in the discussion yesterday, mentioning that we have this ideal, this romantic idea that maybe all religions could get together. This whole ecumenical movement has had that as a goal, bring religions together so that we can integrate as one peaceful togetherness. And what I said in that meeting was, wouldn't it be easier just to drop it? And one person saying, I've been to many ecumenical meetings, it was part of my job, and there was no getting together. But it's our ideal. Now, it could sound as though it means abolish all, make a decree, abolish all differences. But I'm not talking about that. I'm not making Jews drop their Judaism and Palestinians drop theirs and Muslim drop theirs. And although if it could happen out of intelligence, then we would be one step further in world peace. But if it happens by decree, it'll shed blood eventually, sooner or later. To enforce something is not intelligent. Intelligent is to see it and drop it in the seeing. Because the danger, the separation and alienation is so clear. And in an open space, there is love for each other. We don't need to respect each other's religions in order to love each other. We may respect each other, but not love each other. Because respect is what is by decree. Now, be careful not to be misunderstood. I personally have respect for human beings. It's something that is very innate. Respect for others, whether they're little children or young or old. I don't have this feeling of certain people one respects, others one doesn't. Maybe I do, maybe I'm blind in some instances. But basically there is respect. And if someone is a devout this or that religion or ethnic adherence, I don't chisel at them. misunderstood. And yet, for oneself, this is the only place where real work can take place. Can there be awareness of one's identifications? Can be the very elemental ones, identified with oneself as a woman. And that being more than just the physical components of it. Identity can be some extra. Or man. Or grandmother. But one can examine it, it's so beautiful. Whatever is looked at lovingly, if you will, interestedly or intelligently, opens up like a flower, reveals itself. To see all the different facets of identity and their consequences, their effect on the body. Right now and when flattered or insulted in that identity. Identity as a mother, as a father. It does something, doesn't it? Once in Germany, in a retreat, a young man came to a meeting and he said, I'm about to be a father. That's really why I come to this retreat. After that, I won't have much time. But I also really clearly want to understand what it will mean to be a good father, because that's what I want to be. And the response that came was, don't try to be a father. Do you understand what I mean? With this identity of father, particularly in Germany, each country has a different complex of associations. Identity of the father in Germany used to be a scary thing for the child. The one who does good for you, who knows best, and so forth. But I meant more than that. What was meant was, grow up with your child, be a child once more and grow up together. We have that rare chance when we have children to grow up again. Most of the time we don't take it, we just dish out what was dished out to us. Not all the time, but a lot of it. Because all the emotions that were sort of controlled through duress by parents and teachers are triggered again when the child goes through the same tantrums, the same insistence, the same wanting his or her way. So even though one is an adult and understands consequences better than children, fast-moving cars and whatever dangers there are, can one be tuned in to this child? Not tuned into one's fatherhood, then there'll be a gap. So, is that a good working thing? To say intelligence is to see what narrows, what divides, to see the danger of it, and in the seeing, to drop it. Is that possible? Not because we have a choice to drop it, but because there's intelligence in looking, and looking can be the dropping. Understanding, seeing and understanding can be the ending of a habit. Not forever, but at this moment. And There are further moments when it can be met freshly, anew. And maybe over the course of time, if it doesn't drop instantly, lose its power because it's seen intelligently time and time again, with all its consequences and narrowness and harm done to oneself and others. And as for love which has not been asked about, can it be there without asking about it or asking for it? The love we usually know is the love we want from others. This unquenchable thirst for being loved, which is the absence of the wellspring within. How can that be tapped or opened up so it flows and spreads without demanding return? If it happens, it's beautiful. If it doesn't happen, it's all right. In sitting here together on day 9, I think it is, having spent 9 days and nights together in all kinds of changing weather, clouds and bright, bright sky, stars at night, cool, cold, humid and hot. Is there right now a listening together which is not all wrapped up with oneself and one's own progress, what one wants to achieve or would have liked to attain? So that the airplane overhead manifests the love of listening to each other and to all there is. One person asked, what does it mean to do this in a group? To sit together, meditate in a group? It may happen, or has it happened, does it happen, that it means a love for each other, and birds, and trees, and all humanity, and the stars way out there. We will end here for today.